Two figures should never have crossed paths that morning. An old man staggered alone through the white silence, his boots soaked, his breath breaking as the winter storm swallowed the city street. His coat was too thin, his strength even thinner. No one was meant to find him out there, miles away, yet bound by the same storm. An ex-Navy SEAL drove with no destination in mind, only memories and his German shepherd riding shotgun, a soldier who believed he'd left mercy behind with the war. Then the headlights cut through the snow and revealed a man who would not survive another hour. What happened next would prove this truth. Even in the harshest winter, some are still called to stop and save a life. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. Duluth, Minnesota woke beneath a sky the color of old steel. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, yet the morning was strangely bright, the kind of winter light that reflected off frozen streets and made every drifting flake visible, sharp as glass. Lake Superior lay somewhere beyond the city, locked beneath ice, breathing cold into every alley and forest road. This was the kind of winter that punished hesitation, that reminded anyone careless enough to linger outside that warmth was never guaranteed. Ryan Cole drove slowly through the storm, his pickup truck cutting two narrow lines through the untouched snow. He wore his Navy working uniform without alteration, digital camouflage flowing uninterrupted across his jacket, chest, and pocket flaps, no solid fabric breaking the pattern. The uniform sat naturally on him, as if his body had been shaped for it rather than the other way around. At 36, Ryan carried himself with the rigid economy of a man trained never to waste movement. His face was angular, cheekbones sharp beneath wind-reddened skin, with a closely trimmed beard darkened by frost. His jaw was clenched, not from anger, but habit, a posture learned in places where relaxing your guard meant dying. Streaks of premature gray threaded through his short brown hair, a quiet souvenir from years that had aged him faster than time ever could. Ryan was not unfriendly by nature, but the war had carved distance into him. He spoke little, trusted slowly, and kept the world at arm's length, not because he hated people, but because caring had once cost him everything. In the passenger seat sat the only being who had never failed him. The German shepherd was 4 years old, large and powerfully built, with a thick coat of dark sable fur. His back and neck were covered in deep black overlay, while his torso faded into rich brown, his legs and belly a warm tan that glowed faintly even under gray winter light. His fur was dense and natural, untouched by shine or silver, built to endure cold rather than look beautiful. A faint scar ran along his ribcage, hidden unless you knew where to look, a reminder of a moment overseas when loyalty had bled. The dog's amber eyes tracked the world with disciplined focus, breath puffing in slow clouds against the glass. He sat upright, balanced, calm, a silent guardian who needed no command to stay alert. Ryan had named him Rex years ago, not for dominance, but for steadiness. Rex did not panic. Rex did not forget. Ryan wasn't heading anywhere in particular. Since leaving the Navy, driving had become a way to outrun stillness. When he stopped moving, memories caught up, faces, radios crackling, names spoken for the last time. So he drove through snowstorms and empty roads, letting the engine noise drown out what his mind refused to bury. The road curved along a stretch of forest near the frozen lake. Trees bent under the weight of snow like old men bowing to time. That was when Rex shifted. His ears pricked forward, muscles tightening beneath his thick coat. A low rumble rose from his chest. Not a bark, not fear, but warning. Ryan eased off the accelerator. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his voice rough but steady. Rex's gaze fixed on the right shoulder of the road. Through the white curtain, something moved, unsteady, irregular. At first it looked like drifting shadow, but as the truck crept closer, the shape resolved into a man. An old man stood alone in the storm, swaying as if the wind itself was holding him upright out of cruel curiosity. He was thin, his posture bent not only by age but exhaustion. A wool coat hung from his shoulders, far too light for the temperature, its seams darkened by melting snow. His hair was white and sparse beneath a knitted cap pulled low over his ears. His face was deeply lined, skin weathered and pale, the kind of face shaped by decades of labor and endurance rather than comfort. One gloved hand clutched a small leather suitcase. The other trembled uselessly at his side. Each breath looked like it hurt. Ryan slammed the brakes. The truck slid several feet before stopping. He was out of the cab before the engine fully idled, boots crunching into the snow. Rex followed instantly, positioning himself between Ryan and the stranger, not aggressive, just present. "Sir!" Ryan shouted over the wind, grabbing the old man's arm as his knees buckled. The man's body felt frighteningly light, fragile as dry wood. "Easy. I've got you." The old man looked up, eyes watery and unfocused, lips blue with cold. I didn't think anyone would stop," he stammered. His voice shook harder than his hands. "Get in the truck," Ryan said, firm but not unkind, steering him toward the open door. "Now." Inside the cab, warmth crawled slowly back into the old man's limbs. Rex jumped in after them, settling at the man's feet, his solid presence grounding the space. The old man hugged the suitcase to his chest as if it were armor. "My name's Hank," he said after a moment, breath still uneven. "Hank Miller." Ryan nodded once. "Ryan." He didn't offer more. Hank's eyes darted to the rear window, then to the side mirrors. "You shouldn't have stopped," he whispered. "They're looking for me." Ryan met his gaze, calm and unreadable. "Who is they?" Hank swallowed hard. "I don't know, not exactly, but I know this. I was followed. And if they find me again—" His voice cracked, the sentence unfinished but heavy. Rex shifted closer, resting his broad head against Hank's boot, a silent promise of protection. The old man flinched at first, then relaxed, fingers trembling as they brushed the dog's thick fur. Ryan started the engine. Snow continued to fall, bright and merciless. As he pulled back onto the road, he glanced into the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, his breath caught. There, running parallel to the truck's fresh tracks, was another set of footprints. Fresh, deliberate, too close. Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't slow down. Some storms, he knew, didn't come from the sky. The cabin sat high on the hill like a watchful eye over the frozen forest, its windows glowing softly against the endless white. Daylight filtered through the frost-laced glass, scattering across wooden floors and rough-hewn walls, turning the interior brighter than it had any right to be in the heart of winter. Snow piled against the porch railings, but inside, the air slowly surrendered to warmth. Ryan guided Hank through the door, steadying him with a firm grip that spoke of long practice helping injured men move without shame. The cabin itself reflected Ryan's nature, simple, disciplined, and quietly resilient. Built decades earlier, it was sturdy rather than elegant, with exposed beams darkened by age and a stone fireplace that bore the scars of countless winters. Ryan moved with efficiency, shrugging off his coat, kneeling to strike a match. Fire caught quickly, flames licking dry wood with a sound that felt almost sacred. He filled a kettle, set it to boil, and draped a tente-soué, thick wool blanket over Hank's shoulders. Hank Miller sat stiffly on the edge of a wooden chair, hunched inward as if trying to make himself smaller. Up close, Ryan could see how deeply time had carved into him. Hank was probably in his late 70s, maybe older. His hands were large but knotted, fingers bent from years of manual work. His skin was pale and mottled, veins standing out like thin blue wires beneath the surface. His eyes, a washed-out gray, carried both fear and stubborn resolve, the look of a man who had survived many storms and expected this one to finish the job. Clutched tightly against his chest was the leather suitcase. It was old, the brown surface cracked and polished smooth in places by decades of handling. The brass clasps were dulled with age, but well cared for. Hank's fingers never loosened their grip. Even as warmth seeped back into his body, even as his breathing steadied, the suitcase remained anchored to him like a life raft. Rex circled once, then sat near Hank's feet. The German shepherd's massive frame contrasted sharply with the old man's fragility. He lowered his head, sniffing the air around the suitcase, then the seams, his nose lingering longer than necessary. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl, not aggression, but focused curiosity. His tail remained still. His posture was alert. Ryan noticed. He always did. "Something in there?" he murmured, mostly to the dog. Hank flinched. "Don't," he said quickly, voice sharper than before. "Don't let him near it." Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing. He poured hot water into chipped mugs, added tea leaves, and handed one to Hank. The old man accepted it with shaking hands, but the suitcase never left his lap. He balanced the mug awkwardly, risking burns rather than setting the case down. "Medication?" Ryan asked after a moment, his tone neutral. "ID?" Hank's head snapped up. Panic flared in his eyes. "No, you can't. Open it." Ryan leaned back against the table, arms crossed, studying him. "If you collapsed out there, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Hank shook his head violently. "You don't understand. If that suitcase opens, people die. Maybe me, maybe you." His breath hitched. "It's the reason I'm running." The words hung heavy in the warm air. Outside, wind hissed against the cabin walls, rattling bare branches like skeletal fingers. Rex let out a short, sharp bark, then fell silent, eyes now fixed on the front window. Ryan followed his gaze, but saw nothing, only snow and trees glowing faintly under the high winter light. "Who's after you, Hank?" Hank swallowed. His jaw trembled, pride and terror locked in combat. "I don't know their names," he said finally, "but I know what they want, and I know what they'll do to get it." Ryan stepped closer and reached for the suitcase, not to open it, only to steady it as it slid slightly on Hank's knees. The reaction was instant. Hank recoiled as if burned, clutching it tighter, eyes wild. "No!" he shouted. "I told you, open it and I'm dead." Rex stood abruptly, positioning himself between Ryan and Hank, not as a threat, but as a barrier. Ears forward, body tense, eyes flicking from the suitcase to the door and back again. The dog seemed to understand something neither man had spoken aloud. Danger did not live inside the case alone. Ryan took a step back, palms open. "All right," he said calmly. "No opening. Not now." Hank sagged in relief, shoulders slumping. Tears welled briefly in his eyes, though he blinked them away with embarrassed fury. "I didn't mean to snap," he muttered. I've kept this thing closed for years. It's the only reason I'm still breathing." Ryan didn't push. He turned back to the fire, adjusting the logs, letting silence do the work words couldn't. He had seen this kind of fear before, men guarding secrets, heavier than their own lives. Night crept in quietly. Snow reflected the moonlight, bathing the clearing around the cabin in an eerie glow that made darkness feel optional. The cabin lights cast long shadows across the trees, turning trunks into watchful figures. Ryan secured the doors, checked the windows, habits drilled deep into muscle memory. Rex paced once, twice, then stopped near the front door, ears lifting again. Ryan froze. A faint beam of light swept across the far tree line, slow and deliberate. Not lightning, not moon. Headlights. Rex let out a low warning rumble, every muscle coiled. Hank saw it too. His face drained of what little color remained. "They found me," he whispered. Ryan reached for his jacket, eyes narrowing as the light cut briefly across the snow, searching, patient, far too close. The suitcase remained sealed. The night did not. Morning came quietly, wrapped in white. Snow still fell over Duluth, but the storm had softened, leaving behind a clean, almost forgiving light. The world looked deceptively calm, every rooftop and pine branch outlined in silver. From the cabin's windows, the frozen forest appeared peaceful, as if nothing dangerous could exist beneath such brightness. Ryan knew better. Winters like this didn't erase threats, they hid them. Ryan was already awake when the crunch of tires broke the stillness. He stood near the window, coffee untouched in his hand, eyes tracking movement through the trees. Rex rose from his place by the hearth in one smooth motion. The German shepherd's posture changed instantly, spine straight, head high, ears forward. He didn't bark. He never barked unless Ryan needed noise. A sheriff's SUV emerged from the tree line, its paint dulled by salt and age, snow clinging stubbornly to the wheel wells. The engine idled with a tired growl before cutting off. A door opened. Heavy boots hit packed snow. "Sheriff?" Ryan muttered under his breath. Hank stirred on the couch. He'd slept sitting up, wrapped in blankets, the suitcase still anchored against his ribs. At the sound of the engine, his eyes snapped open, sharp with fear. His hands tightened around the leather handle until his knuckles went white. "No," Hank whispered. "Not him." Ryan didn't answer. He reached for his jacket, slipping it on over his uniform, then opened the door before anyone could knock. Cold rushed in, sharp and biting. Sheriff Tom Maddox stood on the porch, framed by winter light. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, with a body that still carried strength beneath years of wear. His face was square and weathered, skin roughened by decades of northern winters. A thick gray mustache cut across his upper lip, neatly trimmed, hiding a mouth that looked more used to commands than smiles. Pale blue eyes studied Ryan with professional calm, though something sharper flickered beneath them. Maddox wore his authority comfortably, like a second coat, heavy but familiar. "Morning," Maddox said, voice steady. "Tom Maddox, Sheriff's Department." "Ryan Cole," Ryan replied evenly. "What can I do for you?" Maddox glanced past him into the cabin. His gaze lingered for half a second too long. "We got a call last night," he said. "Report of an elderly man missing, last seen near the eastern road by the lake." Ryan stepped aside. "He's inside. I found him in the storm." Maddox's brows lifted slightly, not surprise, but calculation. He stepped in, stamping snow from his boots. His eyes landed on Hank immediately. Hank shrank back into the couch, pulling the blanket tighter, chin dipping toward his chest. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a man who had learned very late in life that running was sometimes the only option left. "Well, I'll be damned," Maddox said quietly. "Hank? Miller?" Hank flinched at the sound of his name. He refused to meet the sheriff's eyes, staring instead at the floorboards as if they might open and swallow him whole. "You had folks worried," Maddox continued, softer now. "Your family reported you missing." Hank's lips trembled. "I didn't mean to," he murmured. Rex stepped forward, not aggressively, just enough to place his solid body between Hank and the sheriff. His stance was calm, deliberate, protective. His amber eyes never left Maddox's face. The sheriff noticed. His gaze dropped briefly to the dog, then rose again to Ryan. "That's a fine animal," he said. "Military?" "Navy," Ryan answered. Maddox nodded once. "Figures." The room filled with a tense quiet, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire. Maddox turned back to Hank. "Roads down the ridge are gone," he said. "Mudslide last night. It'll be days before they clear it. I can take you to the station for now. Warm bed. Medical check." Hank's head jerked up, his face drained of color. "No," he said sharply. "I'm not going with you." Maddox frowned, genuine confusion crossing his features. "Hank, I'm trying to help." Hank shook his head, panic bubbling over. "Not everyone who wears a badge is who they say they are." The words hit the room like a dropped plate. Maddox stiffened, his jaw tightened, mustache bristling. "Careful," he said. Ryan raised a hand slightly, a calming gesture learned long ago. "He's shaken," he said. "Nearly froze out there." Maddox studied Ryan now, eyes narrowing. "You said your name was Cole." Ryan met his gaze without flinching. "That's right." Maddox's stare lingered, something almost personal flickering behind it. "Funny," he said slowly. "That name sounds familiar." Ryan felt it then, a subtle tightening in his gut. Not fear, recognition. "Anyway," Maddox continued, stepping back toward the door. "If you need anything, radio works intermittently. Don't try driving down. It's not safe." He paused at the threshold, glancing once more at Hank, then at Rex, who hadn't moved an inch. "I'll be back," Maddox said, "once the road's clear." The door closed behind him. The engine started. Tires crunched away. Silence returned, heavier than before. Ryan waited until the sound faded completely. Then he stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the snow. That was when he saw it. A thin line of white powder near the step. Not snow. Too fine, too deliberate, like chalk or ash. Ryan crouched, touched it with a gloved finger. It smeared slightly, leaving a pale streak. His expression darkened. Inside, Hank's voice shook. "He knows," he whispered. "I told you, they always know." Ryan straightened slowly. The storm outside might have eased, but whatever had followed Hank to that cabin was very much awake. The cabin fell into a fragile quiet after the sheriff's departure, the kind of silence that felt stretched thin, as if one careless movement could tear it apart. Snow continued to fall outside, bright enough to turn night into a pale imitation of day, but inside the fire burned low and steady. Hank had finally drifted into sleep on the couch, his breathing shallow but rhythmic, the exhaustion of fear pulling him under more deeply than rest ever could. His head lolled slightly to one side, white hair damp with sweat, his hands still curled as if gripping something that was no longer there. For the first time since Ryan had found him on the roadside, the leather suitcase rested on the floor instead of his chest. Ryan waited. He had learned long ago that patience revealed more than force ever would. He sat at the table, cleaning his knife with slow, deliberate motions, eyes never leaving Hank. Rex lay near the hearth, chin on his paws, amber eyes half-lidded but alert. The dog's ears twitched at every creak of the cabin, every whisper of wind slipping through the seams. When Hank's breathing deepened and steadied, Ryan moved. He crossed the room without a sound and crouched beside the suitcase. Up close, he could see that it was older than it looked, the leather reinforced from the inside, the stitching repaired by careful hands more than once. This wasn't luggage meant for travel. It was something meant to survive. Ryan lifted it gently, surprised again by its weight, not heavy with metal or currency, but with density, as if knowledge itself had mass. He opened it slowly, ready for anything. Inside there was no gold, no cash, no weapon. Instead, the suitcase held paper, dozens of letters bundled neatly with faded twine, the edges yellowed and soft from age. Beneath them lay a small black notebook, its cover worn smooth by years of handling. Tucked into the corner, wrapped in oilcloth, was a USB drive, scratched but intact. The scent that rose from the open case was unmistakable: old paper, salt air, and time. Ryan exhaled quietly. This was worse than money. He lifted the notebook first, flipping through pages filled with tight, deliberate handwriting. Numbers, dates, dock names, container codes, times down to the minute. Even at a glance, the pattern was obvious. Ryan had read after-action reports that looked just like this. "That's a shipping log," he murmured. The letters were personal. Most were addressed simply, no return address, written in the careful hand of a man who had learned to be precise because mistakes were dangerous. Some pages bore water stains, others had been rewritten, corrections scratched out as if accuracy mattered more than pride. Behind him, the couch creaked. Ryan froze. Hank's eyes were open, clouded with sleep but sharp with recognition. He looked at the open suitcase, then at Ryan. There was no anger in his face, only resignation, the kind that came after a lifetime of running. "So," Hank said, quietly, "you opened it." Ryan straightened but didn't close the case. "You were carrying evidence, not valuables." Hank let out a long breath that seemed to drain him. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," he said, "but I knew it would." Ryan pulled a chair closer. "Talk to me." Hank sat up slowly, wincing as stiffness caught his joints. In the firelight, he looked smaller than before, older. "I worked maintenance at the Duluth port," he began. 30 years. Pipes, locks, gates. Nobody notices a man who fixes broken things. That's why I noticed everything." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I saw containers move that weren't on any schedule, seals broken and replaced, manifests rewritten." He gestured weakly toward the notebook. "I started writing it down. At first just to make sense of it. Then I realized what it was." Ryan nodded. "Smuggling." "Trafficking," Hank corrected softly. "Not people, not drugs, equipment. Restricted tech, military-grade components." His voice dropped further. "Things that disappear on paper and show up somewhere they shouldn't." Ryan's jaw tightened. He'd seen the aftermath of that kind of trade overseas. "I tried reporting it," Hank continued. "Internal channels, supervisors, even a badge or two. That's when the calls started, the warnings, the accidents that almost happened." He swallowed. "So I kept quiet. I kept records. I waited." Rex suddenly rose and moved to the hearth, pawing lightly at the floorboards. Not frantic, intentional. He scratched once, then again, then looked back at Ryan. Ryan frowned. "What is it, boy?" The dog barked once, sharp and insistent, then scratched again at the same spot. Ryan knelt and pressed his palm against the wood. It was loose. He pried it up carefully, revealing a narrow cavity beneath the floor. Inside lay a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When he opened it, he found an old military insignia, dulled with age, and a photograph so faded it was nearly lost to time. The photo showed a much younger Hank, broad-shouldered, hair dark instead of white, standing beside another man in uniform. The other man's face was partly obscured by shadow, but the posture was unmistakable. The squared stance, the cut of the jaw, the badge glinting on his chest. Ryan felt a chill that had nothing to do with Winter. Hank saw it and closed his eyes. "I was young," he said. "So was he." Ryan looked at the photo again. "That looks like Sheriff Maddox." Hank didn't deny it. "Tom and I served together. Different roles, different paths. He came home and wore the badge. I went back to fixing things." His voice broke. "I never thought he'd be part of this." Before Ryan could respond, the cabin lights flickered. Once, twice, just enough to notice. Then came the sound. A soft metallic click at the door. Precise, deliberate. Rex growled low, positioning himself between the door and Hank. Ryan moved instinctively, sliding the photo back into the cavity, lowering the board into place. He closed the suitcase and pushed it under the couch. Ryan reached for the door, eyes narrowing. Someone was no longer searching the cabin. They had found it. Day broke hard and clean, the kind of winter morning that looked merciful from a distance, but punished every exposed inch of skin. Sunlight bounced off the snow in blinding sheets, turning the forest into a cathedral of white where every sound carried too far and every shadow felt watched. Ryan moved with measured speed, guiding Hank out of the cabin and onto a narrow trail that cut along the ridge. He didn't look back. He trusted the dog to read what he couldn't see. Rex took the lead immediately, nose low to the ground, breath fogging in steady rhythm. The German Shepherd's dark sable coat stood out sharply against the snow, the black overlay along his neck and shoulders bristling whenever the wind shifted. He moved like a creature that had learned terrain the way soldiers learned maps, by repetition, by survival, by memory. Ryan followed a few steps behind, one hand lightly on Hank's elbow. Hank shuffled forward, hunched inside his coat, clutching the leather suitcase. Against his ribs. In daylight, he looked even older than he had by firelight. His gait was uneven, favoring his left leg, likely the result of some long-ago injury he'd never had the money or time to fix. His face was gray with exhaustion, but there was a stubborn set to his mouth now, the look of a man who knew running was no longer optional. It was required. The trail narrowed as it dipped into the trees, branches heavy with snow arching overhead. The silence felt staged, unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Rex paused, ears lifting. Ryan stopped instantly. He'd learned the value of that silence the hard way. That was when the engine noise came, low, controlled, too close. A black pickup truck rolled into view at the far end of the trail, its tires crushing snow with deliberate slowness. It stopped sideways across the narrow path, blocking any clean exit. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, pulling his hood down just enough to reveal his face. He was in his early 40s, tall and lean, with a narrow frame that suggested endurance rather than strength. His beard was trimmed short and precise, the kind of grooming chosen by men who liked control. Pale skin, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of wet stone. He wore a dark parka that blended easily into shadow, gloves tucked casually into his pockets, as if this were a friendly interruption rather than an ambush. "Hank Miller," the man said, voice smooth and measured, carrying easily through the cold air. "You've been hard to reach." Hank froze. His fingers tightened on the suitcase. "I don't know you," he said, though his voice shook. The man smiled faintly. Not warmth, recognition. "That's not how this works," he replied. "I know you." He turned his gaze to Ryan, appraising him with open curiosity. "And you must be the ride." Ryan stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Hank and the stranger. Rex mirrored the movement, positioning his broad body squarely in front of Hank, head low, eyes locked. The fur along his neck rose, the black overlay bristling like armor. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Ryan. "Nice shepherd," he said lightly. "Disciplined. Military?" Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I'll keep this simple," the man continued. "Hank, hand over the suitcase. No one gets hurt. We all walk away." Hank shook his head, panic cutting through his fatigue. "You don't understand what's in there." The man's smile thinned. "Oh, I understand perfectly." His gaze sharpened. Do you really think I don't know about the USB? The words hit Hank like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly, and Ryan caught him before he fell. Rex let out a low, warning growl, stepping forward half a pace. Ryan scanned the tree line. The man was alone, or wanted to look that way. No visible weapon, no sudden movements. This wasn't a smash and grab. It was a pressure play. "We're leaving," Ryan said calmly. The man laughed softly. "You can try." He took one step to the side, angling his body to block the narrowest part of the trail. "But I wouldn't recommend the woods. My partners aren't as polite as I am." Ryan shifted his weight, calculating. Rex's tail went rigid. Then Rex broke. The dog lunged suddenly, not at the man, but toward a dense cluster of brush to the right. Snow exploded outward as Rex barked sharply, the sound echoing through the trees. Ryan's eyes snapped to the movement. For a split second, sunlight caught metal, a flash. A gun barrel, half hidden beneath branches, pointed directly at them. Ryan reacted instantly, dragging Hank backward as a shot cracked through the air, shattering the silence. Snow burst from a tree trunk inches from where Hank's head had been. Rex veered hard, darting laterally to draw attention, his powerful legs kicking up white spray. "Move!" Ryan shouted, pulling Hank off the trail and into the trees. The man by the truck cursed sharply, his calm finally breaking. "Take them!" he yelled. Another figure emerged from the brush. A second man, heavier set, wearing camouflage mismatched to the snow, face hidden behind a scarf. He moved with less control, less patience. A hired hand, not a planner. Ryan pushed Hank behind a fallen log, pressing him low. "Stay down," he ordered. Hank nodded frantically, clutching the suitcase like a shield. Rex reappeared at Ryan's side, chest heaving, eyes bright with focus. He stood tall, positioning himself again as barrier and warning. Ryan's mind raced. No clean escape, no support, just terrain, timing, and a dog who had already saved them once today. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Bark splintered, snow rained down. Ryan locked eyes with Rex. One nod. The dog understood. The hunt had begun. The forest thinned abruptly, giving way to a narrow service bridge that arched over a frozen runoff channel feeding the harbor. The bridge was old, little more than steel ribs and planks sealed by decades of ice, its surface glazed smooth by wind-polished frost. In daylight, it looked almost beautiful. Sunlight struck the ice at a sharp angle, turning the bridge into a sheet of glass, blinding and deceptive. Ryan knew better than to trust beauty in winter. Beauty was how ice killed you. "Careful," he said, voice tight, gripping Hank's arm as they reached the edge. Hank nodded, but fear had hollowed him out. His breath came in short, shallow bursts, each step hesitant. The suitcase banged awkwardly against his hip, heavier now that panic had flooded his veins. Rex circled once, nails scraping faintly on the ice, then crossed first, weight low, paws placed with deliberate precision. He moved like he understood physics better than men ever did. They were halfway across when the shot came. The crack split the air, sharp and violent. The bullet didn't hit flesh, but it shattered a frozen seam near Ryan's boot. Ice exploded outward, and the bridge betrayed them instantly. Ryan's foot slid, his center of gravity shifting too fast to correct. He twisted, trying to shield Hank, but momentum had already claimed them. They went down hard. Ryan hit first, shoulder slamming into the ice, pain flaring hot and immediate. Hank fell against him, the impact knocking the air from his lungs in a strangled gasp. The suitcase skidded away, spinning across the bridge before slamming into the railing and stopping inches from the edge. "Don't move!" Ryan snapped, already fighting to get his feet under him. Another shot rang out, closer now. Wood splintered. A ricochet screamed into the frozen channel below. Hank clutched his chest, face contorted, eyes wide. "My heart," he wheezed. "Ryan, something's wrong." Ryan swore under his breath. He dragged Hank upright, ignoring the protest from his own shoulder, and shoved him toward the far side of the bridge. "Rex!" he barked sharply, pointing back toward the tree line. "Wide!" The German shepherd didn't hesitate. Rex sprinted off the bridge, disappearing into the brush, barking loudly, deliberately. It wasn't a charge meant to bite. It was noise, direction, misdirection. Ryan had trained with dogs like this in war zones. Rex knew the difference between attack and distraction. Another bullet cracked through the air, but it was rushed, angry. Ryan felt the vibration through the bridge as he half-carried Hank the last few feet. They slid again, but Ryan dug his fingers into a gap in the railing and held. He shoved Hank off the bridge and followed, landing hard in knee-deep snow. Hank collapsed immediately, hands pressed to his chest, breaths ragged and wet. "I can't," he gasped. Ryan dropped beside him, checking pulse, watching the man's face. Pale. Too pale. His heart was racing, irregular. Panic and exertion were pushing a body already worn past its limit. "Stay with me," Ryan ordered, gripping Hank's shoulder. "You're not dying here." Rex reappeared moments later, darting back from the woods, snow clinging to his muzzle. His ears were pinned back now, eyes bright with urgency. The distraction had worked, but only bought seconds. Ryan hauled Hank up again. "Warehouse," he said, pointing toward the distant port structures visible beyond the trees. "We make the docks." They moved fast, crashing through drifts, the world narrowing to breath and pain and survival. The harbor loomed ahead, skeletal cranes and rusted buildings rising out of the snow like forgotten monuments. Ryan spotted it immediately, a low warehouse with a partially collapsed roof, set back from the main docks. No lights, no movement. They burst inside, slamming the door behind them. Darkness swallowed them for a split second before their eyes adjusted. Light spilled through gaps in the broken roof, slanted beams illuminating dust, ice, and long-abandoned machinery. Snow had blown in and hardened on the floor, turning the interior into a frozen maze of shadows and glare. Ryan shoved a crate against the door, listening. Footsteps crunched outside, heavy, multiple. Hank sagged against a support beam, barely upright now. "I don't think I can go any farther," he whispered. "You don't have to," Ryan said. He grabbed the suitcase, slid it under a workbench, then reached inside his jacket and pulled out the USB. "This is why they want you alive." He spotted it then, an old laptop half buried beneath tarps and debris. The casing was cracked, the screen scratched, but when Ryan opened it, a faint glow flickered to life. The battery icon blinked red, but it was alive. Ryan jammed the USB in, hands steady despite the chaos. The file opened automatically. Video. The footage was grainy, shot from a distance but unmistakable. Shipping container, seals being cut, men moving quickly, efficiently, and then the camera shifted. A face filled the frame. Sheriff Tom Maddox, younger than he was now, but unmistakable. Same squared jaw, same eyes. He stood beneath harsh dock lighting, envelope in hand, nodding once before slipping it into his coat. The timestamp rolled across the bottom of the screen. Years ago, long enough to rot a conscience if it ever existed. Hank let out a broken sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I told myself I was wrong," he whispered. "That I was seeing what I wanted to see." Ryan felt something settle in his chest, cold and absolute. This wasn't corruption by accident. This was choice. Outside, boots crunched closer. The door handle rattled once, then a voice cut through the warehouse, calm and familiar. "Ryan," Maddox called, "open the door." Ryan closed the laptop slowly. Rex stood beside him, muscles coiled, eyes fixed on the door. Hank slid down the beam. Strength gone, clutching his chest. Ryan exhaled, mind racing. He looked down at the old man, then at the dog who had followed him into hell without question. The storm outside hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. Snow fell thicker as night settled, but darkness never truly arrived. The harbor lights burned high and relentless, their amber glow bouncing off the frozen ground and turning the docks into a blinding mirror. Every drifting flake caught the light, every shadow stretched too long, too sharp. It was a night where hiding felt impossible, where truth, like footprints in fresh snow, refused to stay buried. Ryan stood just inside the warehouse door, shoulders squared, body angled protectively toward Hank. The old man sat slumped against a steel pillar, chest rising unevenly, one hand still pressed over his heart. His face was slick with sweat despite the cold, skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Fear had aged him further in the last hour than years ever could. Rex sat close to Ryan's left leg, massive frame coiled but motionless, dark sable fur catching the light like burnished iron. The dog's gaze never left the doorway. Sheriff Tom Maddox stood outside, framed by falling satellite, snow and port lights. He hadn't drawn his weapon. His hands hung loose at his sides, posture relaxed in a way that suggested complete confidence. Up close, the years showed more clearly on him. The creases around his eyes cut deep, his gray mustache flecked with frost. He looked like a man who had worn authority so long he no longer remembered what it felt like without it. "I'm not here to start a war," Maddox said calmly, voice carrying through the open space. "I'm here to end a problem." Ryan didn't respond. He watched the sheriff the way he'd watched enemy commanders overseas, not for what they said, but for what they didn't. Hank's voice broke the silence. "I tried to do it the right way," he rasped. "I filed reports. I spoke to supervisors. Everything disappeared." He coughed, pain flashing across his face. "I learned quick that the system protects its own." Maddox sighed, the sound almost weary. "You should have let it go, Hank. And that, live knowing what I saw?" Hank shot back weakly. "You taught me better than that once." Something hardened in Maddox's eyes. "That was a long time ago." Ryan finally spoke. "This doesn't end with you," he said evenly. "You're not working alone." Maddox's mouth twitched, not a smile, an acknowledgement. "Smart man," he said. "Too smart to be standing in the middle of this." He took a single step closer, boots crunching softly. "You're a SEAL. You understand silence. You hand over the USB and the old man walks away alive. You both do." Rex's ears flattened slightly, a low vibration humming in his chest. Ryan felt it through his boot. Ryan's hand slipped into his pocket, movement slow, unthreatening. His phone vibrated once, barely a breath of sensation. The signal was weak, flickering, but it was enough. He typed with his thumb without looking, sending compressed files and timestamps to a contact labeled Emily Carter. Emily had been 28 when Ryan first met her, trapped in a crushed sedan during a lake-effect snowstorm 2 winters ago. She was tall and slender, with auburn hair usually pulled back into a practical knot, and pale skin dusted with freckles she never bothered to hide. She had steady hands and steadier eyes, the kind of woman who didn't panic when others did. Now 30, she worked nights as a trauma nurse at the Duluth Hospital. More importantly, her older brother was a freelance journalist who owed her more favors than pride would admit. Ryan didn't know if the message would go through. He only knew it had to be sent. Maddox watched him closely. "You're making a mistake," he said softly. "This world runs because men like me make hard choices." "No," Ryan replied. "It breaks because of them." Hank let out a shaky laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. "You always did talk like a hero, Ryan." Maddox took another step. "Last chance. That was when the lights went out. Not all of them, just a row along the docks. The warehouse dimmed instantly, half the interior swallowed by shadow. The snow outside still reflected light, but the balance had shifted. Darkness now had places to hide. Behind Ryan there was a sound. Click, distinct, mechanical, the unmistakable snap of a safety being disengaged. Ryan didn't turn. He didn't have to. His body had already adjusted, weight shifting, breath slowing. Rex rose in the same instant, muscles locking, head snapping toward the sound. Hank whimpered softly. Maddox didn't move. He only smiled faintly, as if watching a board finally tip in his favor. "Careful," the sheriff said. "You're running out of room." Ryan's mind raced, mapping angles, distances, risks. One man in front, another behind. Hank barely conscious, Rex ready but not invincible. And somewhere out there, a message traveling through snow-choked air, looking for the right set of hands. The night pressed in, bright and here, merciless as the trap closed. Dawn arrived without ceremony, a pale gold light spilling across the snow like a quiet apology. Inside the warehouse, the glow crept through the broken roof panels, cutting clean lines through drifting dust and ice crystals. Ryan felt the moment before he saw it, the way the night loosened its grip, the way men grew careless when they believed the worst had already passed. He shifted his weight and made his choice. From his pocket, he drew a small object wrapped in oilcloth and tossed it underhand across the concrete, letting it skid and clatter into the light. "There," he said evenly. "You win." The sound pulled eyes and instincts in the same direction. As the men surged, Ryan pivoted, gripping Hank's arm and steering him toward a side door half hidden behind stacked pallets. Rex exploded forward at the same instant, not to bite, not to maim, but to command space. his dark sable body filling the doorway with a bark that carried authority, his black overlay neck bristling, as he planted himself between threat and retreat. The effect was immediate. The men checked their steps, surprised by the force of presence rather than teeth, and in that breath of hesitation, Ryan and Hank slipped through the side exit into the dawn. Outside, snow reflected the new light so brightly it forced narrowed eyes and slowed pursuit. Boots slipped, orders tangled, sirens rose from somewhere beyond the cranes, first distant, then unmistakably closer. Emily Carter arrived with them, breath fogging as she ran, auburn hair escaping its knot beneath a knit cap, freckles stark against pale winter skin. She moved with the calm of someone accustomed to chaos, eyes scanning Hank's posture and color before she even reached him. "Pulse is thready," she said, already kneeling, voice steady as a metronome. "Let me work." Behind her came uniforms that didn't belong to any one town, state investigators and an independent task unit whose badges were plain and whose faces carried the tired resolve of people called in only when the rot ran deep. Sheriff Maddox stepped out from the shadows last, hands raised, confidence finally gone from his shoulders. He looked older in the daylight, lines etched hard around the eyes, the mustache grayer than before. When the cuffs clicked shut, there was no speech, no plea. Only the hollow look of a man who had mistaken authority for immunity. The warehouse filled with motion as evidence was logged, the real USB recovered from Ryan's sleeve, the notebook cataloged, the video cued again and again until denial had nowhere left to stand. Hank was lifted onto a stretcher, oxygen hissing softly, his breathing easing as Emily nodded reassurance. "He'll make it," she said to Ryan, meeting his gaze. "You did the right thing." Hank caught Ryan's hand as they wheeled him away, fingers surprisingly strong. From inside his coat he pressed a small, heavy circle into Ryan's palm. "For when the cold gets loud," he whispered. It was an old pocket watch, silver worn thin at the edges, glass spidered but intact. "A man once gave me warmth when I had none. Keep it moving." Hours later, with the docks cleared and the lights steadied, Ryan returned to the hill. He replaced the cracked board on the cabin sign with a fresh plank carved by steady hands. "Winter Mercy Cabin. Shelter in storms." Rex lay on the porch, dark sable fur stark against the snow, eyes soft yet watchful, breath a calm rhythm in the cold air. The town took the name quickly, as towns do when a truth fits their bones. By evening, the phone rang. Emily's number. Hank was stable, safe. Ryan looked down at the watch in his palm. It ticked once, then again. The sound blended with the hush of falling snow and the low, satisfied woof from Rex at his feet. Ryan didn't chase the past anymore. He stayed. He watched. And when the winter asked its questions, he answered by opening the door. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they come as a man who stops his truck in the snow, or a loyal dog who refuses to leave his side, or a door that opens when the world feels completely closed. God does not always send angels with wings. Often, he sends people who choose compassion when it would be easier to keep driving, people who listen when a stranger is afraid, people who act when silence would feel safer. In our everyday lives, we may never face a blizzard like this one, but we all meet people lost in quieter storms. A kind word, a helping hand, a moment of courage. These are the small miracles God places within our reach. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if you believe that mercy, faith, and kindness still matter, please subscribe for more stories like this. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every storm, and may you always be someone who stops when others need saving.